reported that people have seen Camilla appeared multiple times around that place.
Silence enveloped the long, cold corridors of Buckingham Palace as rumors of a historic throne transition grew thicker by the day. The king's rapidly declining health brought with it a severe drop in public trust for Queen Camilla, sending shockwaves through the ancient walls of the court. Seeing the massive wave of support shifting decisively toward Prince William and Princess Catherine, Camilla was consumed by an overwhelming fear of losing everything, her power, her status, and her influence, when this current reign officially ended. Driven by desperate ambition to secure the financial future of her own biological son, Tom Parker Bowles, her deep greed manifested into a frantic, secret plot to plunder priceless royal assets. To conceal her inner panic and broadcast an illusion of absolute authority, Camilla chose a display of ultimate ostentation, using her position to force the keeper of the royal treasury to hand over the legendary, solid diamond crown brooch. She pinned this priceless treasure tightly to her chest at every single public event as a psychological shield, a blatant, arrogant proclamation to the world that she was still the true master of the palace. Yet, right behind that borrowed brilliance and magnificent facade, Camilla surreptitiously orchestrated a despicable crime aimed directly at Prince Andrew, who is currently broken, vulnerable, and isolated at his Royal Lodge residence. Knowing that Andrew held core, sensitive financial documents of the family that could serve as ultimate leverage, Camilla used a massive, untraceable sum of money to heavily bribe Paul, Andrew's trusted personal valet. Late at night, under the cover of pitch-black darkness, Paul stealthily broke into Andrew's private study, systematically ransacked the antique bookshelf, and stole a heavily secured black steel box. Inside this mysterious box was not just cash, but a complete set of highly confidential crisis management files and handwritten personal letters capable of utterly ruining Andrew's honor forever. Clutching the stolen box, Paul slipped through the dark, winding palace passages and delivered it directly to Camilla, who was waiting anxiously in a luxury vehicle with its lights turned off in the secluded backyard. From a darkened, high balcony of the opposite building, Prince Edward and Duchess Sophie quietly witnessed the entire shady transaction unfold through high-powered binoculars. In stark contrast to Camilla's loud ostentation, Edward had always chosen to build his profound influence through strategic silence, timely presence, and highly calculated public absences. Seeing the black steel box securely in Camilla's hands, Sophie gently but firmly squeezed her husband's hand in the dark, their eyes locked in grim determination. They understood immediately that this woman's unchecked greed had finally crossed all moral boundaries and that the stolen steel box was the ultimate detonator for an uncompromising struggle for survival to protect the future of the next reign. Just 2 days after the stealthy theft, Queen Camilla began executing the next ruthless step of her grand plan without showing a single shred of hesitation. Instead of letting the black steel box sit idle, she decided to weaponize its devastating contents to bring Prince Andrew down to his knees immediately. Camilla arranged a private meeting with Prince Andrew in a small, dimly lit stateroom located deep within the palace's isolated West Wing, a quiet spot rarely frequented by staff and entirely devoid of any palace surveillance cameras. When Andrew entered the cold room with a weary, anxious face, looking like a man carrying the weight of the world, Camilla offered absolutely no polite greetings or royal courtesies. She sat casually and dominant in a large velvet armchair, her long fingers lightly and mockingly tapping on the black steel box already placed prominently on the antique oak table. Seeing his top-secret possession in his calculating sister-in-law's hands, Andrew's face instantly paled to a ghostly white, his breath catching in pure horror as his heart pounded. He instinctively moved to rush forward and snatch the box back with force, but Camilla quickly and aggressively blocked him, slamming her palm down onto the metal lid with a sharp, echoing crack. She slowly and deliberately opened the box, revealing the thick files, stamped confidential, and the private handwritten letters written in Andrew's own unmistakable script. Camilla looked up at her broken brother-in-law with the bone-chilling, cold glare of an apex predator holding absolute victory in her hands, enjoying every second of his intense terror. She used no grand, dramatic language, nor did she threaten physical violence. Instead, she delivered a specific, ruthless, and entirely non-negotiable condition. Camilla calmly pushed a pre-drafted handwritten note toward Andrew, along with the heavy master keys to the royal lodge that the treacherous valet Paul had stolen. The Queen's condition was crystal clear and terrifying. Andrew had to sign this official paper immediately, surrendering all rights of use, future inheritance, and the master keys of the royal lodge to Tom Parker Bowles, her son from her previous marriage. Camilla asserted with ice-cold certainty that if Andrew refused to sign, or intended to inform the king, the entire explosive contents of the sensitive documents inside the steel box would appear on the front pages of the largest, most ruthless tabloids in the United States and the United Kingdom the very next morning. That would mean Andrew's remaining honor would be drowned forever in a bottomless pool of public disgrace, and he would be swiftly exiled from the country in total shame. Andrew trembled violently, his weak hands gripping the edge of the heavy oak table to keep his knees from buckling and collapsing onto the floor. Cold sweat poured down the forehead of the once proud prince as he stared at the document that would seal his financial ruin. He knew deep down that he had absolutely no way out, for the Royal Lodge was his greatest remaining asset, the final secure refuge for himself and his children. But if the explosive secrets in the steel box were exposed to the public, he would face total, immediate abandonment by his family and an overwhelming wave of global public outrage. Under Camilla's blatant, ruthless extortion, Andrew was forced to bow his head in absolute humiliation, realizing his complete defeat. He slowly picked up the black ink pen Camilla had prepared, signing the asset transfer document with shaky, jagged lines that betrayed the sheer panic and desperation raging in his mind. Camilla retrieved the signed paper, took the master keys, and slammed the lid of the steel box shut with a smug, mocking sneer that showed her complete contempt. She stood up gracefully, adjusted the sparkling diamond crown brooch on her chest, and turned to walk away, completely confident that she had executed a flawless operation without leaving a single trace. However, her supreme arrogance had blinded Camilla entirely, leaving her unaware that her wicked deeds had been captured by the sharp eyes of another royal woman hidden deep in the shadows. Duchess Sophie was standing perfectly concealed behind the thick, heavy velvet curtains of the narrow corridor leading directly to the isolated stateroom. She had been quietly tracking Andrew's movements ever since her husband, Prince Edward, warned her about his highly unusual, erratic behavior over the past week. Through a small, unnoticeable gap in the velvet curtains, Sophie witnessed the entire ruthless blackmail session from start to finish, watching Camilla use the black steel box as ultimate leverage. She saw the exact moment Andrew, trembling in pure terror, signed the note and handed over the precious master keys to the Royal Lodge. Seeing Andrew step out of the room with a face as pale as a corpse, nearly collapsing onto the floor in despair, Sophie had to hold her breath tightly to make absolutely no sound. As soon as Camilla and Andrew departed in opposite directions, Sophie moved swiftly and silently through the family's private side passages, skillfully evading guard patrols to return to Edward's study. Locking the heavy wooden door behind her, she described every single agonizing detail to her husband with extreme precision, from the black steel box and the master keys to the handwritten note Andrew was forced to sign. Sophie emphasized with great urgency that Camilla was frantically accelerating her timeline, desperate to convert collective royal assets into her son's personal property before the king passed away and William took the throne. Listening to his wife's shocking account, Edward's face hardened into stone, his eyes glinting with a terrifying, protective coldness. Camilla's corporate greed now had a concrete target and tangible evidence. It was no longer just baseless rumors whispered in the palace corridors. Edward knew with absolute certainty that if they did not stop her in time, Camilla would continue to use that steel box to control, manipulate, and blackmail other family members, causing an irreparable fracture to the entire royal institution. He decided right then and there not to approach the king, knowing his brother's health was highly critical and could not withstand any further severe family shocks. Edward stood up, looked out the vast window into the foggy London night, and affirmed resolutely to Sophie that they would conduct a comprehensive, covert investigation entirely on their own. They would use silence as their primary weapon to cast an invisible, inescapable net around the arrogant queen, setting the stage for a grand trap that would eventually strip her of her stolen power forever. The cold morning mist of London had barely lifted when Prince Edward began executing his masterful strategy of deliberate absence, setting his invisible net into motion. He officially notified the master of the royal household that he would be embarking on an extensive, multi-city overseas tour across Europe to inspect and support various international royal charities. This calculated move provided the perfect diplomatic cover, allowing Edward to vanish from the London scene for days without raising a single red flag among Camilla's hyper-vigilant informants. However, the prince's true destination had absolutely nothing to do with public ribbon-cutting ceremonies, crowded press conferences, or elegant diplomatic forums. He traveled swiftly under an assumed security detail to the major financial hubs of Europe, following a faint but critical trail left behind by Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's ambitious son. Edward knew that to legitimize the fraudulent handwritten deed transferring the Royal Lodge asset from Prince Andrew, Tom had to channel the transaction through highly secretive offshore private funds to erase any suspicious traces of extortion. Operating effectively as a high-level royal detective, Edward traveled relentlessly from city to city, quietly setting up confidential meetings with his most trusted, long-standing contacts deep within the elite European financial world. He painstakingly gathered every small clue, tracing suspicious cash flows and identifying the clandestine agreements that Camilla's faction was desperately making behind the family's back. Meanwhile, back at Buckingham Palace, Edward's sudden absence left Queen Camilla feeling exceedingly smug and completely untouchable. She arrogantly dismissed her brother-in-law as a weak, timid royal who chose to flee the country simply to avoid witnessing her rapid expansion of power and influence. While Edward was hunting for ironclad financial clues abroad, Duchess Sophie seamlessly assumed the dangerous role of the ultimate eyes and ears inside the palace walls. She made a conscious effort to attend every single high society tea party, official reception, and intimate social function alongside Camilla, maintaining a subtle, non-threatening, yet close enough distance to carefully observe the Queen's every move. Sophie was an incredibly sharp, perceptive woman who flawlessly played the part of a harmless, submissive aunt who always smiled politely and stayed far away from palace disputes. It was this exact innocent exterior that caused Camilla to lower her guard entirely, comfortably revealing her highly guarded, secret daily habits right in Sophie's quiet presence. Through days of unblinking observation, Sophie realized that despite her loud arrogance, Camilla was deeply cautious, paranoid, and constantly living in fear of being discovered. The Queen never left Andrew's black steel box in an easily accessible or predictable spot. Instead, she kept it securely locked away inside a heavy, small safe camouflaged behind a massive antique portrait hanging in her private bedroom. Sophie also discovered a priceless, telling psychological detail. Every single time Camilla prepared to leave her private quarters to receive foreign guests or go out for an event, she habitually raised her hand to check and lightly touched the diamond crown brooch pinned to her chest. It was not just an act of vanity or style, but a natural, subconscious nervous reflex of a thief who had just plundered a massive treasure and used its cold brilliance to soothe the underlying panic in her mind. Sophie meticulously logged Camilla's entire daily routine, recording exactly when she walked in the royal gardens, when she held private audiences, and which specific individuals came and went to deliver or receive confidential envelopes. Back in the quiet private banks of Switzerland, Prince Edward's silent, relentless investigation finally yielded a decisive, historic breakthrough. Through long-standing, ironclad connections, Edward located and directly confronted a high-level financial broker in Geneva who held the keys to Camilla's offshore network. This prominent individual was the exact middleman who had recently received a massive, suspicious deposit from Camilla's personal private account to initiate the complex legal procedures for transferring the Royal Lodge property to a shell company under Tom Parker Bowles' name. Facing the broker in a tightly closed, heavily soundproofed room, Edward did not resort to dry administrative threats, hollow warnings, or slow legal maneuvers. Instead, he deployed his own immense, cold authority and presented concrete, undeniable evidence showing that Andrew's handwritten note was the direct product of a dirty, criminal extortion scheme. Edward bluntly warned the terrified broker of the catastrophic personal consequences, instant career ruin, and severe, unyielding retribution from the royal house if he continued to involve himself in the illegal dispersal of plundered palace assets. Terrified to the core by the prince's stern, unyielding authority and ironclad arguments, the broker crumbled completely to save his own skin. He opened his private drawer and surrendered a heavy stack of documents to Edward, including full copies of the wire transfer receipts, detailed logs of his secret face-to-face meetings with Tom Parker Bowles, and a list of handwritten receipts bearing Queen Camilla's own unmistakable script and direct signature of authorization. Holding the invaluable stack of documents, Edward felt the immense weight of this irrefutable proof, immediately packed his bags, and booked a private flight back to London that very night to execute the next dangerous phase of the plan. His and his wife's silent hunt had ended in total triumph, securing the lethal evidence needed to destroy the Queen's facade. Upon setting foot back on London soil from his secret trip abroad, Prince Edward did not choose to return to his comfortable residence to rest or unpack. He went straight to Kensington Palace, navigating through an old, forgotten underground passage reserved strictly for senior members of the dynasty, a hidden path where Queen Camilla's extensive spy network could never reach. In an antique, chilly wine cellar deep underground, untouched by servants or public light, a secret meeting had been carefully prearranged. Waiting there in the deep shadows, away from any prying eyes, were Prince William and Princess Catherine, their expressions grim and resolute. The air inside the damp room was thick with immense tension and a biting chill, perfectly mirroring a quiet battlefield mere moments before the first historic shot is fired. Skipping any empty pleasantries or formal greetings, Edward stepped forward toward the weathered wooden table and firmly placed the thick, leather-bound file he had gathered across Europe onto the rough surface. Sophie stood gracefully beside her husband, quietly unlatching the folder to expose the shady financial receipts under Tom Parker Bowles' name and the handwritten letters carrying Camilla's direct script sent to the offshore Swiss broker. William stepped closer, lifting the documents under the dim, flickering candlelight, his eyes blazing with a pure, unbridled fury as he read the ruthless blackmail lines forcing his uncle Prince Andrew to surrender his home. Catherine gently but firmly touched her husband's tense shoulder to keep him calm, her face turning incredibly sharp and resolute as she grasped the sheer, terrifying scale of their stepmother's ultimate crime. Camilla did not merely want to seize a royal estate. She was surreptitiously carving up the family's historical assets chunk by chunk to build a miniature, independent dynasty for her own son before the throne officially changed hands. Sophie lowered her voice to a whisper, laying out the precise daily schedule and security habits of Camilla that she had meticulously logged over the past days. She emphasized how Camilla always hid Andrew's black steel box behind the antique portrait in her private bedroom and how the diamond crown brooch on her chest was an inseparable talisman she used to quiet her inner guilt and greed. A dark, powerful alliance was officially forged among the four of them in that underground cellar, bound by absolute loyalty to the survival of the dynasty. The counter-strategy was meticulously mapped out, split clearly between the two factions of their secret battlefront to ensure total victory. William and Catherine would take charge of tightly monitoring the internal palace guard forces, ensuring Camilla's trusted henchmen could not smuggle the black steel box out of the palace grounds before the night of the upcoming international gala. Edward and Sophie would be the ones to directly spring the trap, exploiting Camilla's own supreme arrogance to lure her to her ultimate demise. Sophie confirmed that Camilla planned to finalize the handover of the master keys and royal lodge deeds to her son on the very night of the grand gala at Buckingham Palace, a hectic time when the attention of all international guests and security would be entirely consumed by diplomatic protocols. They resolved not to employ any administrative or legal interventions beforehand, as Camilla was highly cunning and could easily destroy the evidence if she caught wind of any danger. The alliance needed a face-to-face entrapment, a devastating, public psychological retribution delivered right before the international nobility, so Camilla would have zero chance to twist the truth or play the victim. Edward looked at William and nodded, a powerful, silent consensus between the true heirs of the crown. Camilla's immense vanity in wearing the diamond crown brooch would become the very rope that hanged her, and the four quietly departed the cellar in different directions, preparing for a historic gala night where the villain's mask would be ripped away without a shred of mercy. Barakat Adela Pendragon Bab 3, Bab Terakir, Yang Durenkas Menjadi Sekatar, 3.000 Karakter Total Sejuai Instruksi Anda, Tampa Jito Waktu Dansa Bagian, Desachakan Dalam Versi Bahasa Inggris Dan Terjemahan Bahasa Indonesia. Narasi Voiceover Bab 3, Ringkas, Total Sekatar 3.000 Karakter, Tampa Jito Waktu /Subbagian, Versi Bahasa Inggris, English version. The Grand Hall of Buckingham Palace was ablaze with light on the night of the International Gala, gathering hundreds of foreign ambassadors and royals. Queen Camilla appeared splendid in a radiant crimson velvet gown, with the stolen diamond crown brooch pinned proudly to her chest as a symbol of absolute power. Smiling at her guests, she covertly slipped a small golden key to her valet, Paul, commanding him to sneak into her bedroom, retrieve Andrew's black steel box from behind the antique portrait, and deliver it immediately to her son, Tom Parker Bowles, in the back reception room. She assumed Prince Edward had accepted defeat due to his intentional absence from the main table. However, the trap had already snapped shut. As Paul reached the bedroom door, Prince William's iron grip clamped down on his wrist from behind, while Princess Catherine stepped out from the shadows. William secured the golden key, ordered the guards to muffle the treacherous valet, and open the safe behind the portrait, retrieving the heavy black steel box containing the original blackmail note and the master keys to the royal lodge intact. Moments later, just as Camilla prepared to offer the grand toast on the podium, the massive double doors of the hall burst open. Prince Edward strode in, ice-cold and majestic, accompanied by royal guards escorting Tom Parker Bowles, whose face was paralyzed with panic. The ballroom music ceased instantly as Edward slammed the black steel box onto the center table, scattering the blackmail documents before the stunned international dignitaries. Camilla attempted to shift the blame onto her valet, but Edward unleashed his ultimate masterstroke. During his secret travels abroad, Edward had shown Tom ironclad proof that Camilla had set up a financial trail to turn her own son into a scapegoat if the king ever uncovered the plot. Realizing his biological mother's ruthless selfishness, Tom chose to save himself from prison. He looked Camilla square in the face and confessed aloud to the entire assembly that she was the true mastermind, pulling out a bundle of her direct handwritten instructions to prove it. Camilla collapsed onto the podium in ultimate humiliation as her own son delivered the fatal blow. Prince William stepped forward with a powerful motion, forcefully ripping the diamond crown brooch right off Camilla's chest, tearing her expensive gown, an act that stripped away every title and royal privilege she possessed. That very night, the furious king signed the supreme decree erasing her title as Queen forever. Escorted by security through the palace's back exit into a disguised vehicle, Camilla was driven into permanent exile under strict house arrest at an isolated house in northern Scotland, entirely cut off from the world. Tom Parker Bowles faced total bankruptcy as his personal assets were seized to compensate for the damage, and the master keys to the royal lodge were returned to Prince Andrew. The next morning, brilliant sunlight washed over the main balcony of Buckingham Palace. Thousands of citizens cheered for Prince William, Princess Catherine, Prince Edward, and Duchess Sophie standing proudly at the center. The brutal purge was complete, and royal justice was brilliantly restored under a new order entirely cleansed of deceit.